Hello and welcome to my channel. Hi, I'm Wendy J. Haney, and today I am going to show you how to make this beautiful quilt block. This is called the Arrowhead. Yes, it is very, very important you put the in front of it. And it's, did I say Arrowhead? Yes, the Arrowhead. I was saying it wrong earlier. It's important when you're Googling this block that you put the in front of it, because if you search on the Arrowhead quilt block, you're going to find a whole bunch of blocks that don't look anything like this quilt block, like using flying geese. Yeah, so you need the. It's very important. I'm going to show you two different ways to make this quilt block. I've never heard of this quilt block. I came across it in a magazine and thought, oh, well, that's kind of a cool block. And the way they did it, I thought, yeah, let's do this block. Then, as I was Googling it, I came across somebody else who did it a different way. And I'm doing a little bit of a twist on that one, so I end up with sizes that are identical, so you can see two different methods to get the same quilt block when you're finished. So, use the chapters below as you're working through this and figuring out which quilt block you like the best, and then you can always go back to that chapter to start on it. And I'm going to digress for a few minutes. Peggy Rogers, you made my week. Peggy is one of my viewers, and Friday I happened to take time off to go to lunch with my neighborhood ladies. They get together once a month for lunch, and we went into Loudon, Tennessee at the Cafe Lee Ellen, and we were having lunch. That evening, I get home, and it had been a long week. Work threw me a curveball. It's one of those weeks. And I open up my phone and look at my email, and I have an email from Peggy. Peggy said she was at the Cafe Lee Ellen, and she saw me, and she's going, why does she look so familiar? And so after I left, she went up and walked to the table of ladies that I'd been at and says, who was that person? And when they told her, she goes, oh, that's why I know her, from her YouTube channel. So that was very, very cool, Peggy, to let me know that somebody recognized me. Oh my gosh. It made my day. So if you see me somewhere and you recognize me, come up and say hello. I would love to meet any of you that are watching this video or any of my videos. So thanks for letting me digress there. And Peggy, thanks for a wonderful end to a bit of a stressful week. It just finished my Friday off fabulously. Okay, back to this. The first method starts with two colors. Well, obviously both methods start with two colors. I'm going with a purple and a pinkish. I love purple, as you can tell. Yep, and usually I go with a magenta, but pink matched, and I had the fabric. We're gonna start with two 8-inch quilt blocks, one of each color. And I always like to start because I never know who is watching and what experience they have. I'm working with some fabric that I have 6 yards of, so I have a tendency to just cut off about 24 inches and work with it. But, oh yeah, we're not quite even. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do, because I always strip cut. I don't dink around with cutting one 8-inch block at a time or whatever. We're gonna cut a whole strip. So what we need to do is, because I slapped this off of a big chunk of fabric, I have a pretty good, I don't know if the video will pick it up, but there's a pretty big difference between the back piece of fabric and the front. So we're gonna need to seriously square this up. So I'm gonna kind of mark and go, okay, that's where I need to be. So I'm gonna take my long ruler. That's the one I'm gonna be cutting on. And then I'm gonna put a shorter ruler and get it evened up at the bottom of my fold line of my fabric. So then I can take my large ruler, there we go, and butt it up against it. And that way I know this cut line is going to be accurate. So there we go. Okay, Now I have a straight line. Okay, I am working with a ruler that is 6 inches wide. Ha ha! Well, guess what? That is not going to work to cut an 8-inch block. No problem. Take another ruler. I'm just going to use this one since I've got it. And I need 2 more inches. So and your other ruler does not need to be as long as this. All you need to do is get it butted up against it. So if I've got 2 inches on this ruler and 6 inches on this ruler, I'm going to cut an 8-inch strip. And it's all going to be straight because I straightened this line. So I'm going to make sure my first ruler is nice and accurate on the side. I can butt this up against there. And if everything is straight, this is straight on the edge of my fabric. This is all straight on the fold line of my fabric. Okay, 6 plus 2, we've got 8. There we go. Now I have an 8-inch strip of fabric. I'm going to square it up, and in this case, I'm going to just use my top and my bottom lines. There we go. Okay. Now I have, there's my trusty ruler. This is an 8.5-inch ruler. So now I have a good straight line here, here, here. I can easily cut. And you know what? Sometimes you get little curves. Yep, I'm gonna have to trim off just a little. Whoops, I'm off the camera. I have a tendency to shift. Depending on where my fabric is, I shift to the left. So there's my 8. I'm gonna square that up. And you know what? Sometimes your strips, maybe they aren't quite as accurate. So up here, I have a little bit I'm gonna trim. Cutting and pressing and your accurate seam are the 3 primary things to getting a good finished block. Okay, there's my purple. I'm gonna do the same with my pink. Okay, so now we have my pink, and my pink is so weird. I have to mark it because otherwise I can't tell the right side from the wrong side. My purple, there we go. So I've got my 2 pieces of fabric. We are going to put them right side together. Okay, now here's a little bit of a thing that you need to do. In the upper right and the lower left, we're gonna sew these blocks together, but we wanna leave a 2-inch gap, upper right, lower left. So I put my fabrics together like this, and I haven't pinned them yet. And I've got this itty bitty ruler, and I'll have to admit, it's a 2.5-inch ruler, so every time I put it on here, I have to make sure I have my 2-inch and not 2.5-inch. Okay, so I'm gonna mark my line. And in here, I've discovered you wanna mark your line so it goes far enough in past the size of your presser foot, so when you're stitching, you see it under your presser foot. If you just make a tick over here, I don't see it when I'm stitching. And I'm gonna do the same thing up here. Now, when I sew these together, I go, because I sew this way, my fabric's over here, my 1/4 inch is here, I'm gonna sew here. Then I end up flipping my fabric and I sew here. Then it's like, okay, now I need to sew from that mark down here. Well, starting exactly on that 2-inch mark, I just found that difficult to get it just right. So I'd much prefer starting on an edge. So what I do is so there's my mark. I actually flip my fabric over and I mark the other side of the fabric also. This way, and you don't have to, this is just what I've figured out. This way, I can flip my fabric over if I need to and I want to, and I still have my 2-inch mark visible whichever side of the fabric. Okay? Here's another idea, and I hate to say it, that is not a sticky note. I thought it was. But you could take a sticky note and cut out a 2-inch strip. Let's see, where's my icky paper fabric? So if you did that, then you could just slap your little sticky note on there and mark it, or use it as you're sewing and not do any marking, because otherwise I'll have to admit, marking on my blocks every time I sew, that might take a while. So experiment with ways that you can very accurately identify that 2-inch spot and not make it tedious. Then, now that I have my marks on both sides, I pin things together, and then I go to the sewing machine, and as I said, I 1/4 inch there, flip it, 1/4 inch there, and then I know this is weird, then I flip it over and can do it 1/4 inch here, because there's where I need to stop. And I can start at the top. And then here, I can flip it and do the same thing. My preference, see what works for you. And then we have our finished sewed block. Once you have your block all sewed, you've got your gap up here in the right and your gap up here in the left. That's your 2 inches where you started and stopped your seam. Okay, it's important that you remember that, because now we're gonna do what we've been doing for the last few videos. Yep, we're putting quilt blocks together and then we're cutting them up. Yep, there we go. So we're gonna cut this one up too. We're going to take our ruler and cut corner to corner. In this case, I don't need my rotating mat because we're gonna pick this up anyway. I match this corner with the seam and this one. So it should be the same point as your corner, but I match up my seam corners. Okay, corner to corner. And you'll know if you're doing it wrong if you don't have a complete corner seam. Then you go, oops, my block is turned wrong and I need to flip it, because we need to go corner to corner. Don't cut into those 2-inch gaps there or you're going to be unhappy. Okay, set one aside. This one here, important, orientation. Your gap in your lower left corner when you do this next cut. Once again, I love this ruler, my 6-inch by 12-inch. Okay, and be accurate with this, because I had an oops and I cut one of these like 1/4 inch short, and I couldn't figure out why my block was out of whack. Yep, it was. You want a 2 inch. So put your ruler 2 inches on the edge of the fabric. The 1/4 inch should be on your seam, if you're using a 1/4 inch seam, but it's about consistency. So however you line it up, be consistent. I'm putting my 2 inch on the edge. Once again, my gap is in my lower left corner. Cut. Don't move anything. Lift it up. Now you're going to put your 2 inch mark on the bottom of your triangle. Yep, and if you'll notice, this is where you're going to cut 2 inches right into that corner gap. This is why you did this. Okay, and now you end up with this. And if you did it right, all of them have one seam. So we needed to leave that gap, so when you open this up, you get a 2-patch. And if you didn't leave that gap, well, that would be sewn and that would be sewn and, well, oops. you wouldn't be able to open it up very well. Wouldn't do much for you. So now you understand why you needed that 2-inch gap. Okay, set those aside. Grab your other triangle. Turn it. One turn to the left. And if you're cutting your angles, so maybe you went to the sewing machine with your 8-inch block pairs and you sewed a whole bunch of them together. Then you came to your cutting mat and you cut your diagonals and you just separated your halves. No problem. No problem. All you have to do is make sure every time you do your cuts, your 2-inch gap is in the lower left corner and you'll be fine. So, 2 inches. Lift it up. 2 inches. There we go. Okay, now you have two of everything. Well, you have a couple of triangles there. The fabric doesn't want to come to pieces. So you have 2 pink triangles. Well, okay, whatever color you're doing. I have 2 pink, 2 purple triangles. You've got your little, I don't know, arrows. That's what we're going to call those. Your little arrows. And you have a pair that is purple on one side. They're opposite colors. Let's just put it that way. So there you go. And another one of those. And then you have your 2 patches. Now, when it comes to pressing, for my 2 patches, just press them to the dark or whichever. Press both of them the same way. Don't need to press those triangles. Yep. Now, when it comes to these, what we're gonna do is we're gonna put these 2 patches together, and actually I'm gonna set those aside and grab the ones I've pressed already. What we're gonna do with our 2 patches, I pressed them both to the dark, so we're gonna put these together, and by doing that, they nest. So we're gonna put these together and sew a 1/4 inch, and you're going to get a 4 patch out of that. And then what I do is I pinwheel my 4 patch. So that means your seams are gonna be a little bit different as far as the order. So I go and create my 4 patch and do that. What I've discovered though is the easiest thing to do then as far as pressing your arrowheads is press them opposite directions. Press one pair. I pressed one pair to my pink, the other pair I pressed to my purple. And if you lay them out together, basically you'll discover, as I did when I was just pressing, that you're gonna press them both to the left or the right, whichever you choose. So for me, I was over at the ironing board and I was pressing. I'm pressing always to my left. Everything was pressed to my left as far as the orientation. That way, when we come back together and start putting things together, these will match up very well with your 4 patch. And I should have made my 4 patch ahead of time, and I didn't. So I'm gonna go get my 4 patch together, and then I'm gonna show you how we're gonna put this block together. I have my 4 patch put together. And this is where I pinwheel my 4 patch. So all you do is you open it up. I usually do this at the ironing board, and you just twist that seam that you just made, and you probably got 2 stitches right there in the middle, and they'll come apart, and then you just pinwheel it. And basically oops, I said basically, dang it, I gotta quit saying that. You're gonna have this cute little 4 patch of your seam in the middle. Focus, there we go. See? I like to pinwheel. It keeps my seams flatter. And then when you take it to the long arm, your long armer is happy because it's not all these heavy clunk, clunk seams. Now we have our pinwheel, and I would press that. But for now, we're gonna leave that. And well, as far as pressing the seams of your arrowheads, I was wrong. It worked fine for me the last time I did it, the first time I did it. For those of you that have ever watched an old John Wayne movie called Fiddlesticks. Now I'm not going to be able to remember it. I had it in my head a few minutes ago. Anyway, it's an old John Wayne movie about blowing up oil well fires. And they were going to blow up 3 fires at the same time, and they needed to be precise. And the guys come to him and said, "We measured, all 3 are exactly the same timing for here." And he goes, "You only measured once? You only tried it once?" They go, "Yeah, but it was perfect the first time." "No, come back to me after you've done it multiple times and it comes back matching exactly all the time." I couldn't help thinking about that as I did this and went, well, when I pressed them the first time it worked, it didn't this time. So I would suggest you not press your arrowheads until you have your pinwheel done. Then you can place your arrowhead opposite sides together and go, "Oh, my pinwheel is pressed that way. My arrowhead needs to be pressed that way, to the left." So play with it. Once you get it figured out, I think it has to do with which direction maybe you sew your seam. I'm not sure. I'll have to try it. Now that we have everything pressed, and now we get to lay it out. Put your pinwheel in the middle. That's the easiest thing to do. Next thing, do your arrowheads. You're going to want to, and I'm going to do it on point to show you, because this is how the block is going to end up, kind of on point. Match up opposites. So you don't need a sample because it's really pretty straightforward, and you'll know when you goof. Oops, pink, pink, that's wrong. That one goes over there, and that one goes there. All right, now we have our arrowheads laid out. Now we grab our triangles. The purples go between the 2 pinks. Basically, oh, dang, I sure like to use the word basically, don't I? This is what you're gonna do. Put your triangles in the corners that are opposite colors of what your triangles are. So as you can see, your colors are opposite. You don't want, this would be wrong. You don't want your purples together. So for me, I want purple, pink, purple, pink. And as long as you do that through your entire block, and you'll notice it, you'll see it and go, "Oh, well, that's wrong." Get it laid out before you sew it together. Then we're going to sew in rows. And that's why I laid it out this way, which your 4 patch in the middle is on point. But as you can see though, you end up with a block. I start with the middle. And I do that. I'm going to pick these up for you. I start in the middle. Put those together, and if you pressed right, and then I leave it. I don't press it at this time, because this is one thing I did realize, is that if I get my rows done, and then I wait to press till the end, I can press, in this case, I would probably press these to the outside, and then I'd come back and I'd press these to the inside. So I get my rows done, then I go back and make sure my pressing is going to match everything up. Your middle row was very easy. 4 patch in the middle, your arrows on the end. Your edges, Let me grab one that's not done. Your edges, oh heck, I think that's right side up. You want to lay out so when you're laying it out, before you've done any seams, everything lays out very nicely. Straight across the bottom, and your angles are here. So that, if you start trying to do something weird, well, you're gonna know. So don't do that. It would kind of match up, but no, that's not gonna work. Get your straight across the bottom. And sew those together. Right sides together, 1/4 inch. Right sides together, 1/4 inch. Then you're gonna end up with this. And I know you're looking at this going, oh, but Wendy, look at, ooh, do I have the right side together? Oh, I do. That pink is very deceiving on right. You're looking at this going, but what? Wait a minute. Can you see it there? Your corners don't match up anymore. This is kittywampus weird. No worries. No worries. Just keep moving with me because this is all going to be trimmed down and this extra will be trimmed off. So once you get here and you think, oh my gosh, I've made a mistake. No, you haven't. Just keep moving forward and get your next set done. I'm going to get my next corner done. And then what we're going to do is you're going to get, you've got your middle, then you've got your 2 sides done. Press them to make sure your seams are opposite. Then put them together, matching. I'm going to show it this way. I think it'll be better. Matching your middle seam and your edges. That's where you need to match. So match your seams up. Key thing when, I'm going to flip back here to stitching this. I always like to start my stitching on a straight edge instead of at an angle. But when, so I'm, let's see how I would have been doing it. Oh, like this. So I would have had it together like this and I would have been stitching down. When you get down here to the bottom, to this point, you're gonna need your purple thing or a stylus or something to hold on to that little pesky corner of the triangle and keep it there so it remains straight as you finish stitching. I had to rip mine out. My corner got, well, it shifted out and that's gonna throw off everything. So be careful with your points of your triangles and making sure they stay straight as you stitch across them. And I really wish I could find my purple things. For the life of me, I've unpacked everything. I don't know where they are yet. Gotta find them. Anyway, I used the point of a tiny scissors and it got the job done. I am gonna go sew the rest of these together and then, yeah. So do that, do your edges, sew them together, and then we're gonna have our block and I'll show you how to trim it up. And now we have the block ready to be trimmed. So a key thing, as you're working with your edges here, don't be thinking you need to trim these up. Don't. Just leave everything sticking out there because we're going to trim it up at the end. Here's something else. Oh, and before I forget, that movie I couldn't remember, it's called The Hellfighters. John Wayne, great movie. And by now, my husband's gonna edit these videos and he's gonna get the first video where I couldn't remember the name and I know doggone well, he's gonna put an asterisk in there and give you the name of the movie before he gets to this video where I remembered it. So anyway, had to tell you that. The other thing I discovered is as I'm doing my videos, I'm working with multiple blocks so that I can have them together at different times and making it quicker and less editing for Kevin. As I was putting things together, I had one of these done and I had a middle section done. And it was actually this middle section that I had done. We're gonna fold this and pretend. So I have this done and I have this done and I put it over here and go, Oh, actually that one, shoot. Well, oh, that's because I flipped them around. Oh yeah, okay. Oh, I know what it was. Sorry, I digress here. I had it like this. And I had this one done, and then I come over and I put it there and I go, what the? It's right, pink, purple. So how come it doesn't fit on my middle section? I'm thinking, okay, do I seriously need to keep all my pieces together for one block? Is it that big a deal? Well, here's what I figured out. When I made this block, I laid it out this way, and this was my middle. Pink, purple, pink, purple. The other block I'm working with, I laid it out this way. Let me see if I can make it more obvious. So my middle was purple, pink, purple, pink. So it all depends on what direction you put your middle pinwheel as far as which things go with it. So don't panic. It does all go together and you don't need to be particular anal about it. But the other thing is, I would suggest you keep your pieces together for a block together because your seams were precise for that block, those pieces of fabric. Therefore, they will all match up better when you put it all back together. Excuse me, if you keep them together. It's just kind of that simple. I was messing around and didn't. So once I figured that out, I went, why is this not right? It was fine. You now have your finished block and you need to trim it up because obviously, I'm gonna hold this up and we're gonna let the camera focus. As you can see, things don't match up around the edges. Yeah. We're going to trim this block down to a 9-inch unfinished, which I find a very unusual size, but that's what the magazine had for their quilt. And I'm going to tell you in a minute, you can kind of do what you want with it. I do not have a 9-inch square. I have an 8.5, which isn't going to do me a whole lot of good. So I have my 12.5-inch square. The key thing, we got a light here that keeps annoying my ruler. When you trim it up, the important thing to do is you need to keep it centered around the middle. We're going to trim it to 9 inches, which means the center in the middle is 4.5 inches. So with my OmniGrid ruler, I have a diagonal here, and it has a little mark that I can see. There's my 4.5. So I should be able to keep my diagonal there, 4.5 there. And then what you also want to do is, because we're trimming this to 9 inches, your 9-inch mark of your ruler should hit your corner here and there. In this case, we're pretty good. We're pretty good. Yeah, I'm liking it. So actually, I'm really good with this block. I think there was another one that I went, I'm a little askew, where I didn't have quite enough fabric on this side. The 9-inch block, this, that, your large triangles should be at the edge of 9 inches. This way of doing it does not give you any wiggle room at all to be trimming off everywhere. It expects these 4 triangles to be exactly 9 inches. And you know what? Mine are pretty close. I'll probably actually have a little bit I could trim there and there, but in general, I have no complaints about this one. Okay, so we're gonna trim it. And I'm gonna trim all the way across because, as I said right here, there's a little bit there. And you know what? My corner there is not quite accurate. I didn't have it quite angled right. And then you flip it, and you get, in this case, you should be able to put your your 9-inch corner down here, and that line, your angle should match. A 9-inch up here that matches your corner, a 9-inch down there, and mine is slightly, actually it's not too bad. It's slightly off, it's slightly. So we're gonna adjust it a little here. My 4.5-inch in the middle, and yep, right here. That triangle is not all the way out to 9.5 inches, and I know you can't really see that. So we're gonna trim that. Yeah, and you're gonna be able to see it here. I'll take a picture of that so I can put it in the video to show you that this one side here, my triangle isn't quite out far enough to get my 9 inches. So with this method, accuracy is very important, and you're going to get a 9-inch unfinished block, meaning it is an 8.5-inch finished, which I'll admit is a kind of weird size, but you're trimming very, very little. So you start with 2 8-inch blocks, put them together, right sides together, and you end up with one 9-inch, the Arrowhead block. Now, if you're struggling with the accuracy of this, no worries. Trim it down to an 8.5-inch unfinished. Where's my, oh, it's there somewhere. I bet it's right here. There it is. Go with an 8.5-inch unfinished, meaning your middle is going to be 4.25. I just about did 4 1/8. So your middle is 4.25. This is an 8.5-inch ruler. So the corner of my ruler goes to my point there, and it should down here. It's, I have to admit, a little maybe kittywampus. But you, as you can see here, you have, well, a 1/4 inch more to trim off. Don't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure this is exactly 9 so I can trim it up correctly. If you trim down to an 8.5, that is fine. And then you're just gonna have an 8.5-inch unfinished block. Key thing to know is where you're going to put it and use it, and making sure it's the size you need. I haven't done the math, but if you start with bigger blocks, you're gonna end up with a bigger unfinished. So feel free to play with it. And with that, I'm gonna move on to the next method, which is taking 2 blocks. But guess what? You're gonna get 2 finished blocks when you're done. Something to be said for that. Now that you know one way to make the Arrowhead block, 2 blocks, and you get 1 block. I'm gonna show you another method where we start with 2 blocks and we get 2 blocks. This time, we're starting with a 12-inch block. The goal is to get the same size as the other one. And I haven't fully done the math, so in this case, I think we're gonna end up with a block that's a little bit larger than a 9-inch, but it's gonna give you some wiggle room. So one of those things, you might need to play with it if you're really looking for a specific size unfinished block when you're done. I have my 2 12-inch blocks. What we're gonna do is we need to get a couple half-square triangles made and then an hourglass made. Once again, we're slicing and dicing after we get things made. So in this case, we're going to get our half-square triangle made. And in this, we're gonna get 2 half-square triangles from our 2 blocks. So you're gonna wanna draw a diagonal, corner to corner, on one of your pieces of fabric. In this case, I have a black marking tool, so I'm gonna mark on the pink because it's the easiest to see. Then you're gonna put, double check, right sides together, square it all up nicely, and pin your edges to make sure everything stays nice and square. And then you're gonna take this to the sewing machine and you're gonna sew not on the line. You're gonna sew a 1/4 inch on either side of the line. Yep, draw your line, stitch a 1/4 inch on either side of the line. And you're gonna end up with this, okay? Now we're going to use that line and we're going to cut on it. You're going to cut on your line, cut corner to corner. And now you have 2 very large half square triangles. I take them to the ironing board, and I'm going to finger press them now. I take them to the iron board because pressing makes a difference. You're going to take these 2 hourglass blocks and you're going to you're going to take these 2 half square triangle blocks and then turn them into 2 hourglass blocks. Easiest thing to do is after you've pressed them, get your marking tool again and you're going to draw your line corner to corner. I think my black will show up, maybe not, on my purple. So on the bottom half, I'm switching to a light marking tool. Now we have a line corner to corner opposite, so it crosses over the lines that you stitched. And that's why it's important to have this pressed. So I'm going to actually go back and redraw that line. Then, once they're pressed, lay them out so that what you're going to do is you're going to put these together and you're going to want them, there we go, this is what I was trying to lay out, opposites. So when you put one over top of the other, I've got this kitty wampus. When you put them, this is the way to lay it out. I apologize. And it really doesn't matter. Basically, yes, basically. Simply, easily, you're going to put one half square triangle on top of the other. You're going to line up your seams as you put them together, which is why pressing is so important. You're going to get those nice and pressed. You already drew your line. You're going to pin these together. And to make sure you've got this right, all you have to do is open it up and go, okay, I'm good. I have an hourglass, matching colors top and bottom, matching colors left and right. We're good. So we can pin this together. Then, once again, you're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch a 1/4 inch on either side of that line. And what's the chance? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So then it's going to look like this. And once again, we're going to come here and we're slicing and dicing. You're going to cut in the middle of, so key thing, when you get to this point, you know you've done it right if this set of stitching crosses over the other. It'll be really, really weird if you get it to the sewing machine and you're trying to sew near the same lines you already stitched. Yeah, it just won't work. So this will make sense as you put them together. And voila! We have 2 hourglass blocks. Well, they're so big, they don't fit in my screen there. There we go. We have 2 hourglass blocks. I am going to go press these. Then I'm going to show you more slicing and dicing to make this work. One thing I want to point out as far as putting your blocks together to make your hourglass. It's something that I realized when I cut up one of my hourglasses and was pressing it, the centers didn't match. I mean, significantly, such that it's like, oh, crud. We're going to take it apart and put it back together. And I think it'll still be fine as long as I leave those 2 pairs together. But as you're putting your blocks together, your half square triangles, is I get the seam nested at the top. I get it nested there, and then I kind of need to, see if I can do it this way, which is opposite of what I normally would. I take the seam and I just kind of roll it down the middle here, because otherwise, if this is off in the middle where these seams intersect here, well, you're gonna have a problem, and when you cut it in half, your hourglass isn't gonna match in the center, and you're not gonna be very happy. So if you just kind of roll it down like that, and in this case, I need to shift it up a little to keep it square, and then just do a little double check, making sure that seam is nice and nested in there so that when you sew in the middle here, you get a nice tight point in the middle, or close enough. So that's something. Now that you have your 2 hourglasses, and the other thing you'll note is that I am not doing any squaring up of this. Therefore, as you put these things together, they may not match exactly. Make them as good as possible. Lining up your seams, nesting them is the most important thing. Then you end up with 2 hourglass blocks. This is where your rotating mat could come in very handy. Lay out your hourglass blocks, and you need them to be opposite. So as you can see, I've got purple at the top here and pink at the top there. This is important as far as this next step of cutting. Once again, keep your sets of squares together. So you started out with your 12-inch squares, your pairs, you made half square triangles, you made hourglasses, now we're cutting them up again. Keep them together because your seams are more likely to match. I'm gonna set this one aside, keeping it positioned the way I need to. I'm gonna put this one on my mat. On this one, what we're gonna do is cut 1 3/4 inches on either side of the line. The original block that we did before has a 1.5-inch center strip. So I wanted to match that. So we've already got one of our seams done. So now we're gonna cut 1 3/4 inches, which will give us a 1.5 inches when I'm done sewing it together. So I line up my ruler. So we've got this is on my seam, my 1 3/4 inches is on my seam, and we cut. And I rotate my mat, and I do the same thing on the other side, making sure I have the lines right. Okay. 1 3/4 inches. Okay, now set this aside. I'm gonna move it off here to my left, leaving it right where it's at, and I'm gonna bring the other one back in, keeping it in the original position I had when I moved it off, which is the purple on the top. This is very important that you keep the orientation right, and you're gonna realize why in a minute. Get my lines. This is why pressing is important, so everything lines up. Okay. Okay. Now, I'm going to get them both on here so you can see what we have. This was the original one I cut. The pink in the top. Let me get this in here. This is the other one I just cut. Now, what we're gonna do is leave the outside edges, and we're gonna just flip, take this one over here and this one over here. So as you can see now, we're doing similar as we had on the other one. Pink, purple, pink, purple. Everything is such that we don't have the same color next to each other. Now we're gonna take these, and I'm gonna flip this over here and match it there. And sew that on there. Matching my seam in the middle, that's important. We're gonna go sew that. This is gonna come over here, and we're gonna sew that. We're gonna go to the sewing machine and get all of these sewed together. We're just attaching our end pairs of triangles to the middle. And then we're gonna come back and do some more slicing and dicing. I now have both of my blocks sewn together. I put the two triangle sides to attach to the middle. I'm laying them out just like I did before, where I've got one block where I've got pink up and the other block where I've got the purple up. And you'll notice we've got wonky edges just like we did with the other way of doing this. Now, I'm gonna move this one aside, and I bet you can guess what we're gonna do. Yup, we're going to cut it again. 1 3/4 inches, lining up your seams. And sometimes this gets a little trickier as you've now sliced and diced it a little. So just kind of do the best you can in getting it lined up where your seams, your 1 3/4 inches is on the seam here, and you've got a seam there. I'm gonna just, yeah, it is what it is. It's as good as it's gonna get. Inch, I'm double checking, because when I started this video, I said to cut a 2-inch, and I stopped and went, oh, I don't think that's right. So Kevin's gonna have some weird editing, and you might see it earlier, and then we're gonna turn it, and we're gonna do another 1 3/4 inches over here. And yeah, my angle is a little funky. I'll have to admit, this was the block that I was not happy with the center seam when I got my hourglass done, so I ripped it out and started over. We're gonna set this aside, and then lickety split, I'm gonna do this one. Key thing is keeping your orientation. 1 3/4 inches. And actually, the rotating mat is handy for this, but it's not ultra important because you are cutting a completely different side, and if the other one shifts, it's not a big deal. Okay, and I'm guessing, once again, we're gonna shift these off. You're gonna know what we're gonna do. We're gonna put it back together again. So now we have these, and we're going to trade out the middles. Once again, giving us, oh, wow, wow, huh. This looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? We are about to the end. There we go. Key thing is I want to double check is this is 1.5 inches on my other block. So right now it should be, oh, this is a weird ruler, 1 3/4 inches. So it's going to be 1.5 inches when we sew that seam. Perfect. Once again, you're going to take the sides, match the seams, and yep, my seams all nest nicely here. If they don't, switch them. Also, I pinwheeled everything on the back. before I sliced and diced it. It was easy to do. Everything worked out. And now we're going to sew it back together before we do the final cut. I now have 2 identical blocks. I have gone and pressed them after I sewed on the edges or all the pieces together. This one pinwheeled very, very well for me. So when I finished, I was able to pinwheel all of the seams. The other one, when I got to the end, it was kind of hit and miss on where I could pinwheel and what worked. So that was kind of nice. Makes it nice and flat. Just like the other one, we have our hanging off edges here, and that's okay. Just like the other one, we are going to trim it up. Let's see. If we trimmed it up just like, nope, can't quite get a 10-inch out of here. I can easily get a 9.5. A 9.5 is that. So 9 3/4 in the middle. So there's my half that hits the corner, the half, and 4 3/4 is in the middle. So yes, this, whoops, yes. I can easily cut a 9.5-inch block out of this without a problem. I've got a little bit of wiggle room over here, a little bit more, easy enough. To make it match the other blocks I've done, I can super simply cut this down to a 9-inch block, which is what I'm going to do because, well, I want it to be the same size as the other. So with that said, if I played with this, maybe if I started with an 11.5-inch block, maybe, then could I not lose as much fabric and still have some wiggle room to trim down to a 9? I don't know. Didn't have time to play with the math and numbers and trying things out, but if you don't want to lose fabric, or this is a perfect size to get a 9.5-inch unfinished and therefore a 9-inch finished. You can decide what to do. I am going to take this and match my corners here. There's my 9, 4.5 in the middle, and a 9. And as you can see, I am trimming quite a bit. I totally get that. And that's why I think if we start with a little bit smaller block, we won't have as much waste. But personally, I prefer having a little wiggle room with this block to trim because we're cutting up so much and we're putting back together, and all of that has a tendency to cause a little bit more inaccuracy, especially when you're a new quilter. So sometimes it's better off to lose a little fabric in order to give yourself wiggle room. Therefore, you're getting a good, trimmed up, unfinished block the size you need. There we go. A 9-inch unfinished block that is identical to the other one we did. 2 different ways to do it. Given how much I trimmed up here, the waste is a little more compared to the other version. If I went with a smaller block and didn't trim off so much, my guess is the efficiencies of your fabric is potentially going to be pretty close, and you're getting 2 for 1 with this way. Half a dozen of one, 6 of the other. You decide which version you prefer that works best for you for cutting. Personally, that whole marking the 2-inch gap, little bit of a pain to do that on all of them, even if I use a sticky note. With this, put things together, cut them apart, put them together. You decide what you like best. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you give this a try sometime. Take care.